Hello, and welcome to The Real Deal with Sean Matthews, where we have real conversations with real people, entrepreneurs, and business owners alike. Now, I reached out to this group, this podcast group, in Facebook a week or so ago, and wow, what an amazing turnout that I had and some reactions. And I've met this lady, and her name is Dominika Coach D. She reached out and said, yes, I'd love to be on your podcast. So I'd love to introduce her to you. She is a brain coach certified by Dr. Amen University, and a neuroencoding specialist. Founder, member of the Neuroencoding Institute, sociologist, educator, public speaker, and an expert featured multiple times in the European media. She helps people regain the feeling of belonging and hope, which is absolutely beautiful. They get to discover that there is more to life than what they are living. She specializes in bringing organic happiness back. She takes a holistic approach that includes your physical well-being, your brain health, spirituality, values, psychology, and your environment. She shares the tools that have allowed her to go from chronic depression, child loss, the feeling of not belonging and being simply miserable, with a perfect life on the outside, to a truly thrilling and happy woman that she is today and has encoded happiness in her DNA. This is wonderful, Dominika. Welcome to the show.
Hello, it is a huge pleasure to be a guest on your show. I'm so privileged that I have the chance to speak to you and to your audience.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and we have a privilege that having you on the show too, because you have an incredible story. And I'd love the audience to hear more about why you started your brain coaching, what got you started, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
My road to coaching was bumpy and long, and it went through self-discovery. I was a child of an actress where my mom was always traveling. And then when I grew up, I fell in love with the wrong men, looking for love with the wrong places, where I was raped, beaten, gun next to my head. And I gave birth to my son when I was 19. While I was giving birth to him, I died. And then 16 months later, he died. I was miserable, depressed. I don't remember 2 years of my life. And when I crawled out of that, I started proving to the world that I can achieve anything. I worked with the Polish president. I worked with the European Union. I was a highly regarded expert in the field of labor law and influence on society because I'm a sociologist. That's where I got my master's from. And it looked like I'm just doing so great. I got married, I got twins, I got divorced, but that man wasn't just for me. He wasn't a bad human after all. And I ended up sitting there going, it's just wrong. It has to be more to life than what I'm living. I am literally miserable. I achieve all those goals and there's nothing. I'm not happy. And I have these amazing girls and I'm just, there has to be more. And I started digging, and I went to a psychiatrist and a psychologist. On top of that, I'm epileptic, which carries a lot of stigma in at least Polish environment and society. And then step by step, looking deep into me, it took me about 9 years. I got to a point where I was like, okay, I got this. I am grateful to the man that hurt me. Yeah. I am literally grateful because he made me who I am. I'm grateful to my ex-husband because he gave me those 2 amazing daughters, and maybe he wasn't the man for me, but I'm grateful for my daughters. And my life became much lighter, yet I was still struggling with being very masculine, achiever, working in a men's environment. And I was still attracting very, I wouldn't say weak, but very feminine energy men. Mm-hmm. And it was just not what I wanted. I wanted to be a little girl. I wanted to be taken care of. And I realized for the second time that probably it's me, not the world. So if it's me, what do I have to do to become better? In Europe, I also worked as a coach for job change and transition. And then when I came back to US after from, working with the ministers and doing all this amazing stuff, my first job was separating hangers at a warehouse with convicts because nobody cared what I did in Europe.
All right.
That
Okay.
was very painful for the ego. So to shorten down the story, I ran across Dr. Amen because I am definitely a science person. I need science. And I absolutely fell in love with his method of coaching because he treats brain as an organ, and he treats this as any other organ can be treated. And the science is proven. There are medical studies on the brain, on our reactions, on everything else that's included in my coaching and the approach he takes, as well as neuroencoding, which takes into consideration our brain connections. And although I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to treat anybody, my experiences with these tools and the other ones I've learned from my coaches and my experiences from Dr. Amen, the training I got, make me feel comfortable enough that I can bring back happiness, because it is all in our brain, and it is our environment, it is our choices, it is what we have programmed into our head, and is also the fact that our thoughts are not our thoughts. And I think before the program we spoke about this, I'm a very, very big advocate of that idea, because when we are, I don't know if you ladies and gentlemen know, when we're in heightened or lowered emotional state like depression or extremely happy, and we in that state hear something like "you are stupid," our brain will associate those two things and will create this as our thought, because as kids we are born only feeling. We have no thoughts. We
Totally.
feel
Yeah.
happy, we feel sad, we feel angry, we feel hungry, we feel tired, but there are no thoughts. Thoughts are perceptions of other people of a given situation or of us connected with our emotions. And very often we have no idea when they are created, and then they just pop up and rule our life. So if they're created by our brain and we control our brain, there is a way we can reframe that, change that, reprogram that with neuroencoding.
Amazing. Yes, and I've heard of neuroprogramming, but neuroencoding, that's a bit different, isn't it? Can you explain more about how that works?
So it is, NLP is part of it, yet the person who has opened this called Joseph McElden III. He created Neuroencoding Institute, and he is a PhD in psychology and neuropsychology. And it takes psychology, NLP, and neuroscience and creation of brain connections, transformers, food, our body movement, our anchoring of our behavior. Because notice that when we are, for example, I don't know, is Australia also high five type of country?
Oh, sometimes, yes, you can.
Sometimes. So when we give a high five, right?
Yeah.
No way you can be angry. It just won't happen. And what you do, you smile, you release dopamine and other hormones, and you're happy. So high five, because of society, got programmed into our brain as a happiness gesture.
Yes.
So if you keep repeating that, you will actually keep repeating the release of happy hormones. Now, when we're depressed, what happens to our body? We curl down, our head goes down, we're not straightened up. We produce other hormones, and because of our feelings, we produce cortisol and other chemicals. We change our biochemistry. So with that being said, neuroencoding takes that into account, and we use our body to change our state consciously until it becomes permanent part of us, like the thoughts became permanent part, but this time we choose what we want our body to remember.
Wow, fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And for the listeners and the viewers out there, Dominika is actually Polish. We didn't say that, but she's living in Texas. So it's fantastic to connect with somebody across the world and see what her side of the world's doing and how she has really grown and understood the the brain and her work. I really love to just go back to those 2 years. You said you don't remember what happened. You gave birth and then you passed for a minute or two.
3 minutes. I was
3
dead for
minutes.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Wow. So there was obviously some trauma there and some brain damage, was there, or?
It wasn't a brain damage
No.
in 3 minutes, thankfully. I was young enough, I guess, that my brain recovered. I think I had more brain damage when it comes to me seizing and falling on the floor in unconventional places until I learned how my aura works and I was able to lay down on the floor before it happened.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And before I learned that, I would just collapse, right, and hit myself in different places because they were grand mal seizures. They are. Haven't had one in 7 years. So that is also part of my huge change because I was triggered by stress, and getting stress under control literally took away my seizures. And I'm super grateful for the work I've done because life without seizures is much better than with.
Yes, I can imagine. So
But the trauma
congratulations.
from child loss, when your son dies and you are trying to bring him back to life. His name was Patrick. He was 16 months old. And I remember before my body shut down and my mind shut down, pain of nails, my hair hurt, my eyelashes hurt, breathing, everything hurt. It was unbearable. And I think I went into this comatose trance state for about 2 years.
Okay.
I don't remember anything. I was told that I used to walk in front of cars, try and commit suicide, that I was constantly had to be tied to somebody because I was not able to process reality. There was no contact with me. I would answer, but you could see that there's a shell, there's like nobody inside.
Oh, I see.
And I think 2 years later, around 2 years later, I woke up one day and I don't know why that happened. I don't know what was the trigger. And really it doesn't matter. But the trigger was that if I'm suffering so much, losing my son that's 16 months old, my mom would not survive this if I would take my life. And this was the moment I started crawling out, going to psychologists, coaches, therapists. They put me on medication. I mean, I've done all the work, and first few years it was quite traumatic. Yet the truth is that the most help I received was from a coach. I guess I didn't have the luck to find a great therapist. I know there are great therapists because my friend used a great therapist and he did wonders. Absolutely, he was phenomenal. So it's not, I just didn't have the luck to find a great therapist. And I reframed my experiences. Now, although it sounds very unusual, I am grateful for the experience of losing my child because he taught me how precious life was and how important it is to say, I love you as much as you can every day, every second, to any person that you feel positively connected to, because one day might be too late and you might regret it. So I learned to love absolutely. I mean, the love that I experience is completely different than it used to be. And I think that was a beautiful lesson. And me being dead for 3 minutes and having my experience of being dead, I also know that he's happy. He's not suffering. He is in a different world. For me, there was no tunnels or anything else like that. Yet there was an experience that I don't know if I have enough vocabulary to describe it in any language that I speak.
Okay. You can try.
Okay. So for me, my experience was that I did see myself being reanimated and they were trying to save my life. And I became this bunch of threads that were a ball that were connected to a bunch of threads that were other balls. There were no other languages, and you would hear and think in a very calm, non-stressful way everything that all those networks thought. You understood everything and their experiences and their feelings, and everything was a part like of this bigger picture where we
Okay.
would share information from one place to another. And it was peaceful. It was happy. There was no anger. There was no trauma. There was communication and growth. And it was very interesting because you weren't a soul, you weren't a material thing. It's like this bowl of threads of energy that is connected to other threads of energy. And I was actually unhappy to go back because it was pretty cool out there.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to die, and I didn't sense that there is anything outside of that. So I didn't sense that there is a bad place you can go to. None of those threads or energies communicated that. And because you can feel, hear, sense everything, every ball of energy around the universe is saying, there was no information that there's hell or there's pain in that state, at
Right.
least.
Yes. Right.
I'm pretty confident that my son is pretty happy looking over me and making sure that I don't mess up the gift that he gave me.
I'm sure he is every day, every day. And
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful story. So thank you for that. And the Dr. Amen, what techniques or what things do you use on your clients now to help them move forward with their brain development?
So first thing we do, Dr. Amen prepared few tests, brain tests that are based on the science that he has peer reviewed and studied. And they're questionnaires. Obviously, it's not a SPEC scan, which Dr. Amen performs in his clinic. So these are substitutes for that if you're not doing the brain scan. And then after that, we look at your brain type. There's no right or wrong brain. There's no right or wrong. It's just what it is and how it was developed. And certain brain types have certain preferences in behavior. So if, let's say, your frontal lobes are not as developed as they should be, it's not your fault, they just aren't. There's a way to influence blood flow to them so you can make more rational decisions and maybe less emotional ones. So there is a set of supplements for different brain types that should be done. And some brain types are recommended with meditation, some are breathing exercises, some are physical exercises. That depends on your brain type. Another very important thing, which I find fascinating, is doing blood work. So I ask to cooperate with your nurse practitioner or your first primary care doctor. So you get your blood work done. And there are certain things I want to look at, and we've been taught how to read them. What's important is that people say, oh, you are in the norm. We don't want the norm. We want the optimum version.
Yes.
Because the norm is between 30 and 90. We don't want you to be at 35. We want you to be at 60 at least. So one of the things we measure, most people don't realize, is your ferritin. It's not iron in your blood. It's ferritin, which goes deep into your cells. Now, if you are lacking ferritin, and you can have, like me, I'm one of those examples, that if I lack ferritin, my iron in my blood is in the norm. It's lower, but it's norm. I have literally no iron in my blood cells, like none.
Oh,
And I have to supplement myself with iron. If I stop doing that, I get dizzy, I get tired, I don't want to go anywhere, I lose my energy. And what do we do as a society? We associate that with depression.
yes.
And we go, I'm depressed. Well, if we don't check that, we don't know if you're depressed or you're just lacking ferritin, because it might be a simple fix. The same with vitamin D3. If it's too low, you are prone to feeling sad, not really energetic, depressed, as we call it. It's actually lack of D3. So there are certain elements that we've been taught how to look at. Obviously, I will not look at your, as I'm not a doctor or endocrinologist. Yet, if those are okay, I would definitely suggest go and check your hormones. Lack of testosterone or being in premenopausal state will do that to you. And there are ways where doctors can prescribe medication that can help that. And why is it important? Because if we're trying to get you out of depression, if we're trying to get you out of anxiety, OCD, whatever else, if you do not provide building blocks in your body, like the ferritin, things that carry oxygen to your brain, for example, like certain spices, then I have no way of helping you actually, because there's nothing to build from. There's nothing to build the new neuroconnectors. So we need to build that up to have better and quicker results. And I think that changes the face, because it really looks at you as a whole person holistically. You're not just your mindset, you're not just your psychology, you're not just your environment, but your body is a big part of that. If you are constantly sitting squished in a little dark room, I guarantee you will feel depressed. I guarantee you, because light is absolutely necessary. Light therapy has been used for years to get you out of that state.
Yes.
So and those things are implemented in Dr. Amen's coaching, which makes it much more holistic, reliable, and usually much quicker if, of course, the monster is not too big. Because if I see after half a year working with you that we're making very slow progress or not enough progress, I will refer you to a psychiatrist or a doctor from Dr. Amen, or a holistic medicine expert at Dr. Amen Clinic, who can look at even more data and kind of set you up for success before you come back to me, and I'll support you again. And I think I like the approach of taking the spiritual part, the medical part, the support part, and not discarding our modern medicine, which does have a lot of achievements. I think one of the fascinating studies you can read on Dr. Amen's universities is that there are 6 or 7, I don't work with ADHD,
ADHD, yes.
There are 6 or 7 types.
Mm-hmm.
And they're located in different parts of your brain. Now, depending which part of your brain they're located in, different medication will work. And there's a simple way. If your child has that, you can, or if you're an adult, if you get a brain scan, they will know in which part of your brain it's located. And it's no more guesswork. Let's try this medicine, see if it works. They will know which one will work, because depending on a brain area, there is 80% success if you use certain medicine. And that, again, I'll leave that to psychiatrists that work with Dr. Amen, who are skilled in that. But that knowledge is available. You can read about it, about those studies, which is fascinating.
It's amazing. And it's great that you do a holistic approach. I'm obviously an advocate for holistic approach. I'm a counselor and a therapist overseas. So I don't ever recommend medication. I think there is a place for medication. But when it comes to depression, as you just commented, is if you're in a dark place all the time, you're always going to be feeling that depressed state. So I'd love you to share that study that you shared with me before we got on here today.
Oh, goodness. Which one did I share with you?
Oh, the one about the study with the going outside in nature.
Oh, the study in Norway. So there's a study done in Norway. I believe you can research that on American Association of Psychology and on the European websites as well for the associations. They took 500 people that were on Prozac, had depression. They took 500 people that got placebo, and they took 500 people also depressed that were prescribed walking in the forest and doing certain breathing exercises. Well, it turned out that after half a year, the best results were not Prozac. Actually, Prozac did the worst and didn't have long-term effects without changing the doses. It was either placebo, and 80% of retention after the study ended, a year after, were people walking in a forest and doing breathing exercises.
Amazing, isn't it?
It was 20 minutes a day, 7 days a week in a green area with as little outside sounds as possible. And there's a certain way, and I recommend that to all my clients, anybody who's feeling stressed out. I walk every day, literally every day, and it's an hour. And I do it for the breath work and also for exercise, because our body is absolutely, if there's another study that I didn't tell you about, which is also phenomenal, that has not much to do with coaching, but it shows how important is our physical health. So they did a study with people who went into coma, and that's also shared by Dr. Amen, that when you go into coma and you have a lot of muscle mass, you are 60% more likely to come out of coma after a month or two without any severe long-term damage, comparing to people without muscle mass who never go back to walking or fully recover, because our body starts pulling from the muscles instead of our tissue that gets damaged. So there are multiple things that you might want to look at, like the study, I don't know if you know about the soldiers and our sleep, how important that is. And finally, sleep is getting recognition in US, which I'm very, very happy, because there are some crazy, people in our world saying, oh, I can do on 4 hours of sleep. Well, you cannot. None of the studies ever prove that you can.
It's not really recommended, is it? It's 4 hours is not enough.
So there is a study done by scientists in the Army, and they did study on over 2,000 soldiers and shooting range. Some slept 8 to 9 hours, and they had 98% accuracy shooting range. Then we had 7 hours. That went down to 80, 70 something accuracy. That's not bad, right? But when it got to 6 hours of sleep, it went down to 50%. And when it went down to 4 hours, it was like 20% accuracy. I'm sorry, but I do not want anybody protecting me or making decisions with 20% accuracy. And that was sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and that's where mistakes happen, especially when you're stressed and lack of sleep. And I
Absolutely.
think and you make a really good point there. The other thing is, who do you work with? Do you work with men and women, or just women, or just men?
I work with men and women that are looking for happiness or feeling that they don't belong and there's more in world. That they are ready to go, okay, I'm doing something wrong. I want to find what that is. And I help them discover that. I work with people with ages 30 to about 45. I do not work with women during menopause because they first have to go through the endocrinologist and get their hormones straight for me to be truly able to help them. And I don't want to take anybody's money knowing that, my results are not going to be as I would want them or they would want them to be, because the goal of working with a coach is to achieve a goal, right? And be happier or whatever else you set yourself. So men and women, absolutely in that age range, living usually in big cities. And that got lost like I did. And one thing that I don't do, I never coach on things I haven't lived through. So if for example, I am not an alcoholic, never was, but I do have coaches with exactly the same training as I do that I can refer you to and say, hey, this is a person, they've been where you've been, they get you, right? I can only coach on theory, and I really don't want to do that because I believe in power of experience, that I can actually relate to you and I know what you're feeling, how you're feeling, and what I've done or my clients have done to overcome whatever state you're in.
Yes, that's actually a big step actually for a lot of coaches and counselors out there, to be honest, is that there are a lot of people out there that either are trained, so even trained counselors, they haven't gone through their own experience so much, but they've just gone and got their diploma or their degree. Same thing with coaches. And I love the fact that you've gone through your own journey, and you've come out the other side happier and healthier, which is fantastic. Such a great story.
I'm crazy happy. I'm a crazy happy person. I recently got a beautiful nickname, Happy Troll, and I absolutely love it.
Happy Troll. That's fantastic. So how do you get them from being that trauma state or whatever they're going through, that stressful state, to being happy? Is there programs that you offer? What is it that you offer?
So most of my coaching is one-on-one. I prefer to do one-on-one. I do group coaching, yet it's not preferred by me, because I believe that everybody, although we can learn from each other, and that's also a benefit, very often at the beginning of the road, we need the attention and eyeballs only on us. And we define together what they would call a success, because after all, it's their life and their journey, and whatever they will feel will be success for them. That's where we're going to go. And the great thing is that when you start growing, my coach has this beautiful parabole or example that he gave me when he started coaching me. He goes, at the beginning, you're like this car that's full of papers and plastic cups, and it's just a mess. And then you start taking those cups and plastic out and those papers, and you see that the floor is super dirty. And then you see that the steering wheel is sticky because you start noticing other things. At the beginning, you couldn't see anything because you were just full of paper and plastic cups. And when you get to that point where you get out of your car and you clean the inside, you see that there are spots outside and you see that there's a Bronco window. Yet it's a very different journey when you're at a broken window level and when you're at a car, that's full a mess and basically nothing is, visible to you and you don't even know where you're driving. So when you don't know when you're driving, I definitely prefer to work one-on-one. If we're at a stage of, we got a car, cleaned out and now we're looking at spots outside, then definitely working in groups is a fun part because it's a quicker growth and people share their experience and they can learn from each other what worked for them and feel the sense of community.
Beautiful, Dominika. The last question I have before we close today is, if there was one thing that you'd like the audience to learn or know about this podcast today, what would it be? What would you like to leave them with?
I'll quote my favorite quote, which is, when you're in hell, in the middle of hell, keep walking, because even hell has its borders.
Wow. I will leave it at that then, Dominika. Thank you so much, Coach D, for being in the present and sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with us today and your beautiful story. This is The Real Deal with Sean Matthews, where we have real conversations with real people, entrepreneurs, and business owners alike. Thank you so much again for coming on. And if you would like to contact Coach D, I will put all her details in the show notes. And again, if you're following over on YouTube, just like, comment below, and tell us what you liked about this podcast. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.